The rain was coming down in sheets that November evening when I stood alone under the broken streetlight, my phone dead, my designer heels soaked through, watching my husband's taillights disappear into the darkness. Ryan had left me there, 20 miles from home, because I'd dared to question him in front of his business associate. "Find your own way back," he'd said, his voice cold as the Pacific Northwest wind. "Maybe the walk will teach you when to keep your mouth shut." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. As I stood there shivering, mascara running down my cheeks, I made myself a promise. This storm wouldn't just pass over me. I was going to make sure Ryan Richardson never forgot the night he left his wife stranded in the rain. My name is Emma Richardson, though back then I still believed that name meant something beautiful. For 8 years, I thought I was living a fairy tale in our picture-perfect Lake Oswego home, running Richardson Design Studio alongside the man I loved. I was 32 years old, award-winning interior designer, featured in Portland Monthly as one of the city's rising creative talents. I had everything I thought I wanted: a thriving business, a gorgeous home that I'd designed myself, and a husband who everyone said was my perfect match. Ryan was the business side of our partnership, the one who handled contracts and client relations while I focused on what I did best, transforming spaces into something magical. We'd met at a design conference in Seattle 6 years earlier, where I was presenting my sustainable luxury concept to a room full of industry professionals. He approached me afterward, this confident, charming man in an impeccably tailored suit, telling me how my vision could revolutionize the Pacific Northwest design market. "You're brilliant," he'd said, his green eyes lighting up with what I thought was genuine admiration. "But brilliance needs the right platform. I could help you build something extraordinary." And we did build something extraordinary. Richardson Design Studio became Portland's premier interior design firm, sought after by tech executives building their dream homes in the West Hills, real estate developers creating luxury condominiums downtown, and boutique hotel owners wanting that perfect Northwest aesthetic. Our client list read like a who's who of Portland's elite. We were featured in Architectural Digest, had a waiting list 6 months long, and commanded fees that made other designers envious. For the first 3 years, we truly were partners. Ryan would handle the initial client consultations, discussing budgets and timelines, while I would create the magic. We'd present together, his business acumen complementing my creative vision. Clients loved our dynamic, often commenting on how refreshing it was to work with a husband and wife team who clearly respected each other's expertise. Our home reflected everything I believed about design. The mid-century modern house overlooked the lake, with floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the Oregon landscape inside. I'd designed every corner, from the custom walnut kitchen cabinets to the Japanese-inspired master bathroom with its soaking tub positioned to catch the morning light. House Beautiful had featured it in their Designer's Own Homes issue, calling it a masterclass in Pacific Northwest elegance. Ryan loved showing off that house, especially during the dinner parties we hosted for potential clients. He'd guide tours through our living spaces, pointing out design elements as if he'd chosen them himself. "Emma has such an eye for detail," he'd say, his hand resting possessively on my lower back. "She makes everything beautiful." I treasured those moments then, believing they showed his pride in my work. I didn't recognize them yet as the first signs of something darker taking root. The changes began so subtly that I almost missed them entirely. It started during our 4th year in business, just after we'd landed the Thompson Industries headquarters redesign, the largest commercial project in our company's history. Patricia Thompson, the CEO, had specifically requested me after seeing our work at the Heathman Hotel renovation. Ryan had been in the room when Patricia called, watching as she spoke directly to me about her vision for transforming their corporate spaces into something that would attract Portland's top talent. "Your aesthetic is exactly what we need," she'd told me. Clean lines, natural materials, that effortless sophistication you're known for. I want you to handle this personally. After I hung up, Ryan's congratulatory kiss felt different somehow, tighter. That's fantastic, sweetheart, he'd said, though I should probably take the lead on the business side with something this big. Patricia Thompson is used to dealing with men in her industry. We don't want any miscommunications. It seemed reasonable then. Ryan did handle most of our business negotiations. But when we met with Patricia the following week, he positioned himself at the head of the conference table, introducing our team as if he were the primary contact. Emma will be handling the creative execution, he'd explained, while I'll manage the project oversight and client relations. Patricia had looked confused, glancing between us. I thought Emma was the lead designer on this project. Of course she is, Ryan had smiled smoothly. But with a project this complex, you'll want someone with extensive project management, experience coordinating all the moving parts. Emma's talent speaks for itself, but I handle the business complexities. I should have spoken up then. Should have reminded Patricia that I'd successfully managed dozens of high-end projects independently. Instead, I smiled and nodded, telling myself that Ryan was just being protective, ensuring our biggest contract went smoothly. That meeting established a pattern that would slowly strangle my role in our own company. Ryan began inserting himself into more client relationships, always with seemingly logical explanations. He'd schedule initial consultations during my site visits, then update me on what the clients wanted. He'd join calls I'd planned to handle alone, taking over conversations about design elements I'd developed. The Hendersons prefer a more traditional approach, he'd tell me after meeting with potential clients. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They're concerned about some of your more modern ideas. I think we should tone down the contemporary elements. When I'd ask to speak with the Hendersons directly to understand their concerns, Ryan would wave me off. I already smoothed things. Over. They just needed someone to explain the concepts in business terms they could understand. You know how some clients get intimidated by too much design theory. My direct client communication began disappearing entirely. Ryan would field calls, respond to emails, and attend follow-up meetings alone, returning with notes about changes needed or approvals given. When I'd suggest that I should be present for these conversations, he'd remind me how busy I was with actual design work. "You're the creative genius," he'd say, kissing my forehead like I was a child who'd suggested something adorable but impractical. "Let me handle the business side so you can focus on what you do best." The office dynamics shifted so gradually that I didn't recognize what was happening until it was nearly complete. Sarah Williams, our project coordinator who'd been with us since our second year, started coming to me with confused questions about project directions she'd received from Ryan that contradicted my design plans. "He says the Morrison project needs to go more neutral," she'd whisper during our coffee breaks, glancing around to make sure Ryan wasn't within earshot. "But didn't Mrs. Morrison specifically request bold colors? She was so excited about the emerald accent wall." I'd assure Sarah that I'd clarify things with Ryan, but when I'd bring up these discrepancies, he'd have perfectly reasonable explanations. The Morrisons had changed their minds. The budget required adjustments. The timeline meant compromising on certain elements, always delivered with that understanding smile that suggested I simply didn't grasp the business realities he was protecting me from. Our evening conversations at home began revolving around his day rather than our shared work. He'd come home full of stories about difficult clients he'd managed, challenging negotiations he'd navigated, problems he'd solved while I was lost in creative land, as he'd started calling my focused design work. The Patel project almost fell apart today, he'd tell me over dinner, loosening his tie like a warrior returning from battle. They were getting cold feet about the budget, but I managed to bring them around. Sometimes you have to speak their language, you know? frame everything in terms of property value and return on investment rather than artistic vision. I'd listen, proud of his business skills, grateful that he was handling the parts of our work that I genuinely didn't enjoy. Numbers and negotiations had never been my strength. I was happiest with fabric samples and paint colors, sketching furniture arrangements, and imagining how light would move through a space. If Ryan could handle the business side, I could focus entirely on creating beautiful environments. But the pride in his voice when he talked about these victories had an edge to it now. A subtle implication that he was saving our business from my impractical artistic impulses. He'd started referring to potential design elements as Emma's ideas when clients questioned them, distancing himself from anything that might be seen as too bold or unconventional. Emma loves pushing boundaries, he'd say during presentations, as if my design innovation was a charming quirk rather than the foundation of our success. Sometimes we have to rein in her more experimental concepts to keep things practical. The clients would nod knowingly, as if artistic temperament was something that needed managing. I began second-guessing my own instincts, wondering if my ideas really were too bold, too impractical, too removed from what clients actually wanted. Our home, once my sanctuary and showcase, became another stage for this subtle transformation. Ryan started making minor changes without consulting me, moving furniture slightly, replacing light fixtures with more traditional options, bringing in artwork that clashed with my carefully curated aesthetic. Just trying to make the space more welcoming, he'd explain when I'd notice a new generic landscape painting where my abstract piece had hung. Some of our clients found your art a little intimidating. This way, they can focus on the design elements instead of trying to interpret modern art. Each change was small, easily justified, and delivered with such care for my feelings that questioning them seemed petty. When I'd suggest that we discuss these modifications first, Ryan would remind me how much stress he was under managing our growing business, how much easier it was to make these minor adjustments than to schedule formal design consultations for our own home. "We're living in the space," he'd say, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we stood in our kitchen. "It should evolve naturally. Not everything has to be a formal design project." But our home had never been just a living space to me. It was my laboratory, my inspiration, my proof of concept for every client who walked through our doors. Every piece had been chosen with intention, every corner carefully considered for both function and beauty. Watching it slowly transform into something more conventional felt like watching my identity being erased one small decision at a time. The financial aspects of our business became increasingly opaque during this period. Ryan had always handled our accounts, preparing quarterly reports that he'd review with me over dinner, explaining our profit margins and growth projections. These conversations became less frequent, then stopped altogether. "Everything's going great," he'd assure me when I'd ask about our numbers. "Better than expected, actually. I'm investing our profits in some expansion opportunities, new marketing strategies, potential satellite offices, business development stuff that would bore you to tears." When I'd press for details, he'd overwhelm me with business jargon about market penetration and brand expansion, speaking so fast and using so many unfamiliar terms that I'd eventually nod and let him handle it. Finance had never been my area of expertise, and Ryan seemed to thrive on these complex business concepts that made my head spin. "You're lucky you don't have to worry about this side of things," he'd say, patting my hand across our dining table. "You get to focus on the fun, creative work while I deal with the boring numbers and legal stuff. Perfect division of labor." Our social life began reflecting these same dynamics. At industry events and dinner parties, Ryan would introduce me as the talented half of our team, always emphasizing my artistic abilities while positioning himself as the practical business mind. People would turn to him with questions about our company's growth, our future plans, our strategic vision, while I fielded compliments about specific design choices and requests for decorating advice. "Emma has such a gift for color," guests would say to Ryan, as if I weren't standing right. There. You're so lucky to have found such a creative partner. I know exactly how fortunate I am, Ryan would reply, his arm around my waist, his smile warm and possessive. She makes everything beautiful. These interactions left me feeling like a prize rather than a partner, beautiful and valuable, but not quite capable of serious business conversation. The woman who'd once presented to rooms full of industry professionals was slowly becoming someone who was admired for her talent, but not consulted for her opinions. The Thompson Industries project became the perfect illustration of this new dynamic. While I spent months developing comprehensive design concepts for their headquarters, creating mood boards and space plans, and coordinating with contractors, Ryan handled all direct communication with Patricia Thompson and her team. He'd return from meetings with notes about their preferences, requests for modifications, and approvals for different phases of the project. They love your work, he'd report after each meeting. Patricia is thrilled with the direction we're taking. She did have some concerns about the open concept in the executive wing, but I explained how it would improve collaboration and productivity. She's coming around to your vision. I treasured these updates, feeling validated that my design choices were being appreciated and understood. It didn't occur to me then to wonder why Patricia never reached out to me directly anymore, or why all feedback was filtered through Ryan's interpretation of what the client wanted. The project was proceeding beautifully, transforming Thompson Industries' sterile corporate environment into something warm and inspiring, when everything changed on that rainy November evening. Ryan had scheduled a dinner meeting with Patricia and her operations manager to discuss the final phase of implementation. He'd asked me to join them, explaining that Patricia wanted to personally thank me for the transformation we'd achieved. She's been getting incredible feedback from employees, Ryan had told me as I got dressed that evening, choosing a sophisticated black dress and my grandmother's pearl earrings. Productivity is up, recruitment has improved, and everyone's talking about how much they love coming to work now. This could lead to referrals for other major corporate projects. The restaurant was one of Portland's upscale establishments in the Pearl District, the kind of place where business deals were sealed over wine pairings and artfully plated entrees. Patricia and her operations manager David were already seated when we arrived, both looking pleased and relaxed in a way that suggested the evening would be celebratory. Emma? Patricia stood to embrace me, her smile genuine and warm. I cannot thank you enough for what you've done with our space. The transformation has been absolutely incredible. As we settled into our seats, Patricia began describing the positive changes she'd witnessed since the renovation's completion. Employee satisfaction surveys had reached record highs. The company had successfully recruited several high-profile candidates, who specifically mentioned the office environment during their interviews. Productivity metrics showed measurable improvement across all departments. Your design philosophy really works in practice, Patricia told me directly. Creating spaces that feel both professional and nurturing, sophisticated but not intimidating. You've given us exactly what we needed to attract and retain top talent in Portland's competitive market. I felt that familiar warm glow of professional satisfaction. The deep fulfillment that came from knowing my work had made a real difference in people's daily lives. This was why I'd become a designer, to create environments that enhanced human experience rather than just looking beautiful in photographs. As the evening progressed, Patricia began discussing potential future projects. Thompson Industries was considering expanding their Portland presence, potentially opening a satellite office in Bend to attract tech workers seeking that smaller city lifestyle. She was also connected with several other executives who'd toured their renovated headquarters and expressed interest in similar transformations for their own companies. I'd love to refer them directly to you, Emma, Patricia said, leaning forward with enthusiasm. Your approach to corporate design is exactly what these companies need. Professional but human, elegant but approachable. It's a rare combination. I was about to respond with gratitude and excitement when Ryan cleared his throat. placing his hand over mine on the table in a gesture that appeared affectionate but felt restraining. "That's incredibly generous, Patricia," Ryan said, his business smile firmly in place. "Though I should probably handle those initial consultations. Emma gets so focused on the creative aspects that sometimes the business details slip through the cracks. I'd hate for miscommunications about scope or budget to complicate these referrals." Patricia looked confused, glancing between us with a slight frown. But Emma handled all the creative and practical aspects of our project beautifully. She understood our needs, managed the timeline perfectly, and stayed within budget throughout the entire process. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I realized that Patricia had been working directly with me on many project details, not receiving everything filtered through Ryan as he'd led me to believe. The timeline coordination, budget discussions, and practical implementation had all involved my direct input and decision-making. "Of course, Emma's involvement was crucial," Ryan said smoothly, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. "But you were working primarily with me on the business side, Patricia. Emma handled the design execution beautifully, but I managed the project oversight and client relations." The confusion on Patricia's face deepened. "Actually, Ryan, most of our discussions were with Emma. You were certainly involved, but she was our primary contact for both creative and logistical matters. I was planning to work with her directly on future projects because our communication was so effective." The tension at the table became palpable. David, Patricia's operations manager, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly sensing an undercurrent he didn't understand. I felt my cheeks burning as the reality of the situation became clear. Patricia had been working with me directly, valuing my input on both creative and business matters, while Ryan had been presenting their interactions to me as his own management of our client relationships. "I think there might be some confusion," I said carefully, my voice barely steady. "Patricia, when we discussed the timeline adjustments for the executive wing renovation, was that conversation with me or with Ryan?" "With you," Patricia replied, immediately. "We talked about it over coffee at the project site. You explained how moving the electrical work to the following week would actually improve the end result because it would allow the custom millwork to be installed first. It was exactly the kind of practical creativity that made this project so successful." I remembered that conversation vividly. I'd been proud of finding a solution that improved both the timeline and the final result. But Ryan had never mentioned that Patricia had direct contact with me about such a significant project change. Ryan's laugh sounded forced as he squeezed my hand again, this time hard enough to hurt. "Well, teams work in mysterious ways, don't they? The important thing is that everyone's happy with the results." But Patricia wasn't ready to let this slide. Her business instincts had clearly picked up on something strange about Ryan's attempts to claim credit for work she knew I'd done independently. "Emma," she said, addressing me directly, "I'd like to set up a meeting next week to discuss the Bend office project. Can you have your assistant coordinate directly with mine? I'd prefer to work with you personally on developing the initial concepts." Before I could respond, Ryan interjected with that same smooth business tone. "I'll have my office coordinate with yours, Patricia. Emma's schedule is pretty packed with design work, so I usually handle the scheduling and preliminary discussions." That's when I made the mistake that would cost me everything. The words came out before I could stop them, driven by a combination of professional pride and growing frustration with being managed like a child. "Actually, Patricia, I'd love to handle that coordination myself. I think we work together very effectively, and I'd enjoy being involved in the project from the initial planning stages." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Ryan's hand went completely still on mine, and I could feel the temperature of his anger even before I looked at his face. When I finally met his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before, a cold fury that made my blood freeze. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, his voice carefully controlled but his eyes promising consequences. We can discuss the logistics later." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and mounting tension. Patricia and David seemed increasingly uncomfortable, clearly sensing the conflict they'd inadvertently triggered, but unsure how to navigate it gracefully. I made appropriate responses to their comments about future projects and upcoming industry events, but my mind was racing with the implications of what had just happened. Ryan had been claiming credit for my direct client interactions, presenting my independent project management as his oversight, and filtering my professional relationships through his control. Patricia's confusion had exposed the depth of his deception, and my moment of professional honesty had challenged the carefully constructed narrative he'd built around our business partnership. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Patricia pulled me aside while Ryan was settling the bill. "Emma," she said quietly, "I want you to know that our entire experience with Richardson Design Studio has been exceptional because of your personal involvement and expertise. Whatever internal dynamics you're working through, please don't let them affect your confidence in your own abilities. You're extraordinarily talented, and any company would be lucky to work with you." Her words were meant to be supportive, but they hit me like a physical blow. She'd recognized something wrong in our professional dynamic, something that suggested my confidence needed defending. The implication that our internal dynamics were visible to clients made me feel exposed and humiliated in a way I couldn't entirely process. The drive home began in silence, but I could feel Ryan's anger filling the car like a toxic cloud. We were heading west on Burnside, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windows, when he finally spoke. "That was an impressive performance tonight," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Undermining me in front of our biggest client, making me look like some kind of credit-stealing parasite." "I wasn't trying to undermine you," I said, staring straight ahead at the road. "I was just being honest about my involvement in the project." "Your involvement?" Ryan's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Patricia Thompson hired Richardson Design Studio, Emma. Not Emma Richardson. You seem to have forgotten that this business exists because of both of us, not just your pretty sketches and color schemes." The words stung, but I pressed on, driven by a need to understand what had really been happening in our business relationships. Patricia said she'd been working directly with me on project management issues. When did those conversations happen? Why didn't you tell me about them? Ryan pulled over abruptly, stopping the car on a side street in an industrial area I didn't recognize. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof and making the darkness outside feel absolute. "Get out," he said, his voice flat and final. I turned to stare at him, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "Get out of the car, Emma. Find your own way home. Maybe the walk will teach you when to keep your mouth shut and when to support your husband in front of clients." "Ryan, we're 20 miles from home. It's pouring rain. You can't be serious." But his expression told me he was completely serious. The man I'd loved for 6 years, the partner I'd built a business with, the husband I'd trusted with my life and career, was prepared to abandon me on a dark street in an industrial neighborhood because I'd dared to be honest about my own professional contributions. "I'm serious as a heart attack," he said, reaching across me to open the passenger door. "You want to be an independent businesswoman so badly? Start practicing." The rain hit my face immediately as I stepped out of the car, soaking through my dress before I could even process what was happening. I turned back toward the car, thinking he'd come to his senses, that this was just a moment of anger that would pass. Instead, Ryan leaned toward the open door, his face illuminated by the car's interior light. "Next time you decide to embarrass me in public, remember this moment. Remember what it feels like to be left behind." He pulled the door shut and drove away, his taillights disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness, leaving me standing alone under a broken streetlight with my phone dead and no idea where I was. As I stood there in the growing storm, something fundamental shifted inside me. The cold rain washing away my carefully applied makeup felt like it was washing away years of illusions. The woman who'd built a successful design business, who'd earned industry recognition and client loyalty through her own skill and dedication, had somehow allowed herself to become someone who could be abandoned on a street corner for daring to speak honestly about her own work. That night, shivering in my ruined dress and soaked heels, waiting for a taxi I'd called from a nearby gas station, I made myself a promise. Ryan Richardson had left his wife stranded in the rain because she'd threatened his carefully constructed fiction about their business partnership. He'd shown me exactly what he thought of my contributions and my worth. Now I was going to show him the storm that was coming for him in return. The taxi dropped me off at our Lake Oswego home just after midnight, the house dark except for the porch light I'd left on that morning. My key felt foreign in my hand as I unlocked the front door. Everything familiar suddenly seeming like a stage set for a life I was no longer sure I recognized. Ryan's car wasn't in the garage, which meant he was either driving around cooling off or had gone somewhere else entirely. Part of me hoped he'd come home apologetic, ready to explain his behavior as a momentary lapse in judgment brought on by stress and too much wine. But as I stood dripping in our marble foyer, looking at the home I'd designed with such care and love, I realized I didn't want his apology anymore. Something had crystallized during that long, cold wait for the taxi. The woman who'd allowed herself to be diminished and controlled had been left on that dark street corner. The woman who'd come home was someone different entirely. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my wet heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd chosen for, their warm honey tones, in our walk-in closet, surrounded by the designer clothes and carefully curated accessories that represented my successful life. I stripped off my ruined dress and threw it directly into the trash. The black fabric had been expensive, flattering, appropriate for impressing clients and commanding respect. Now it felt like a costume for a role I was done playing. I stayed in our guest room that night, claiming I didn't want to wake Ryan when he came home. In reality, I needed space to think without his presence clouding my judgment. I needed to understand what had really been happening in our marriage and our business, while I'd been focused on creating beautiful spaces and trusting my partner to handle everything else. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia Thompson's confused expression when Ryan tried to claim credit for work she knew I'd done independently. I replayed our conversation, recognizing now how many times she'd referenced direct communications and decisions that Ryan had never mentioned to me, the timeline adjustments, the budget modifications, the vendor selections she'd thought we'd discussed together, but that Ryan had presented to me as his own management decisions. When morning came, gray and drizzly as Portland mornings often were, I found Ryan in our kitchen making coffee as if nothing had happened. He was dressed for work in one of his expensive suits, his hair perfectly styled, his demeanor suggesting that abandoning his wife in an industrial neighborhood during a rainstorm was just another Tuesday evening disagreement. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said without looking up from his phone, scrolling through emails while the coffee brewed. "I hope you slept well." The casual normalcy of his tone was more infuriating than outright hostility would have been. He was acting as if I'd chosen to take a taxi home, as if my appearance at midnight soaked and shivering had been a minor inconvenience rather than the result of his deliberate cruelty. "We need to talk," I said, taking a seat at our kitchen island, the same spot where we'd shared thousands of morning conversations about our day ahead, our plans and dreams and shared goals. "Of course we do," Ryan replied, finally looking up. From his phone with that indulgent smile I was beginning to recognize as condescension rather than affection. "You were understandably upset last night. I know the pressure of big client relationships can be overwhelming." His framing of the situation was so far from reality that I actually laughed, a sound that made him pause in pouring his coffee. "The pressure of client relationships? Ryan, you left me stranded 20 miles from home because I told Patricia Thompson the truth about my involvement in her project." I left you to walk home because you embarrassed me in front of our biggest client, he corrected, his tone sharpening. You made me look like some kind of figurehead while positioning yourself as the real talent behind our success. Maybe because I am a significant part of our success? The words came out stronger than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Patricia specifically hired us because of my design work. She wanted to work with me directly because we communicate effectively about both creative and practical matters. Why is that threatening to you? Ryan set down his coffee mug with more force than necessary, the sound sharp against our granite countertop. It's threatening because you're my wife, and wives are supposed to support their husbands, not undermine them in public. We're a team, Emma. That means backing me up, not contradicting me in front of clients. Supporting you doesn't mean lying about my own contributions, I said, something new and unfamiliar rising in my voice. I designed that entire project. I managed the timeline, coordinated with contractors, solved problems as they arose. Patricia knows that because she worked with me directly. Pretending otherwise doesn't make you look more competent. It makes you look dishonest. The mask of patient understanding finally slipped from Ryan's face, revealing something harder and colder underneath. Dishonest? I've built this business into something profitable and sustainable while you've been playing with fabric samples and paint chips. Do you have any idea how much work goes into client relations, contract negotiations, financial management? You get to be the creative princess because I handle all the real business. The real business? I stood up, my anger finally matching his. The real business is what brings clients to our door. It's the award-winning designs, the industry recognition, the word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied customers. That's all. Based on my work, Ryan. My creativity, my vision, my relationship with clients who trust my expertise. Your work? Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sweetheart, your work is picking out pretty colors and arranging furniture. I'm the one who turns that into an actual business. I'm the one who negotiates contracts, manages budgets, handles the complicated stuff that keeps our doors open. The dismissiveness in his voice, the casual reduction of my professional expertise to picking out pretty colors, felt like a physical slap. This was how he really saw my contributions, as decorative additions to his real business acumen rather than the foundation of our success. If my work is so insignificant, I said, my voice deadly quiet, then you shouldn't have any problem with me handling my own client relationships, starting with Patricia Thompson and the referrals she mentioned. Ryan's expression shifted, something like panic flashing across his features before he regained control. That's not how business works, Emma. You can't just go off script with major clients. There are protocols, professional standards. You don't understand the complexities involved. But I was beginning to understand something else entirely. Ryan's attempts to control my client interactions weren't about protecting our business or maintaining professional standards. They were about maintaining his position as the indispensable business mind while keeping me dependent on his interpretation of what clients wanted and needed. Then explain the complexities to me, I challenged. Show me the contracts, the financial reports, the business correspondence. If I'm going to be a real partner in this company, I need to understand all aspects of our operations. You don't need to worry about that stuff, Ryan said, his tone returning to that patronizing gentleness that I now recognized as manipulation. You're already handling the most important part, the creative vision that makes our work special. Why complicate things by getting bogged down in boring administrative details? Because those boring administrative details determine the direction of our company, I said. They affect which projects we take, how we price our services, what our growth strategy looks like. If I'm a co-owner of this business, I should have input on those decisions. Ryan's laugh was sharp and bitter. Co-owner? Emma, you're listed as a co-owner for tax purposes and legal protection. But the real work of running a business, the strategic thinking and financial management, that requires skills you simply don't have. The casual cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow, but beneath the hurt was something else, a growing clarity about the true nature of our partnership. He saw me as a talented employee rather than an equal partner, valuable for my creative output, but incapable of real business leadership. "I have a business degree, Ryan," I reminded him, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. I was successfully freelancing and building my own client base when we met. "I'm not some artistic savant who can't understand basic business principles." "Of course you're not," he said, but his tone suggested he thought exactly that. "You're incredibly talented. But talent and business acumen are different things. You create beautiful spaces. I create sustainable businesses. We each stick to what we do best." The conversation was going in circles, with Ryan consistently dismissing my capabilities while positioning himself as the indispensable business brain behind our success. I realized that no amount of logical argument would change his perception of our roles because that perception served his interests too well. "I want to see our financial records," I said, changing tactics. "All of them. Profit and loss statements, client contracts, bank statements, everything." Ryan's pause was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. "Why would you want to complicate your life with that kind of detail? You trust me to handle the money, don't you?" "I want to understand our financial position," I said firmly. "As a business owner, I have the right to review our books." "As a business owner, you should also understand that constantly second-guessing your partner creates unnecessary stress and complications," Ryan replied. "But fine, I'll have our accountant prepare some summary reports for you to review." Summary reports prepared by him would be useless for understanding the true state of our finances, but I didn't argue the point. Instead, I filed away his resistance to transparency as another piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to assemble. We drove to work separately that morning, ostensibly because we had different schedules, but really because I couldn't bear to sit in a car with him pretending everything was normal. At the office, I threw myself into work on the Henderson project, a luxury home renovation that had been my primary focus before the Thompson Industries celebration the night before. But concentration was impossible. Every interaction with our staff felt different now that I was paying attention to the dynamics I'd previously ignored. When Marcus Chen, our lead contractor coordinator, came to discuss scheduling conflicts with the Henderson timeline, he automatically went to Ryan's office first, even though the scheduling issues involved design elements that were entirely my domain. I intercepted Marcus in the hallway, asking him to walk me through the scheduling conflicts directly. His surprise was evident as he explained that Ryan usually handled these kinds of logistical discussions. "He does?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Even when they involve design modifications and space planning?" Marcus looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. "Well, I mean, you're always busy with the creative work. Ryan usually handles the practical stuff like timelines and contractor coordination." "Why?" "But I'd been handling contractor coordination since our second year in business. I developed relationships with our most reliable subcontractors, understood their working styles and scheduling preferences, and often made on-site decisions about installation sequences and problem-solving approaches. When had that responsibility shifted to Ryan without my knowledge?" "Marcus," I said carefully, "when you have questions about installation sequences or design modifications during construction, who do you usually contact?" "Honestly, it depends," he replied. "For creative questions, definitely you. But for timeline, changes, or budget issues, Ryan." He said it was more efficient to have one point of contact for all the business side of construction management. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Ryan had been systematically redirecting the business aspects of our projects through himself, even when those aspects required design expertise and client relationship management that were my strengths. He'd created a system where I was consulted for artistic opinions but excluded from practical decision-making. The morning brought a steady stream of similar revelations. Sarah Williams, our project coordinator, mentioned that Ryan had been handling most client check-ins during project implementation. Kevin Roberts, our bookkeeper, indicated that Ryan had asked him to prepare all financial reports exclusively for his review. Even our receptionist had been instructed to route certain types of calls directly to Ryan's office, rather than determining which of us was the appropriate contact. Each conversation revealed another way that my role had been diminished without my awareness. I'd been so focused on the creative work I loved that I'd failed to notice my business partnership being slowly dismantled around me. During lunch, I drove to a small cafe near Powell's Books, far enough from our office to ensure privacy, and called Lisa Martinez, my friend from law school who'd built a successful practice specializing in business disputes and partnership dissolutions. "Emma!" Lisa's voice was warm and surprised. "I haven't heard from you in ages. How are things with the design business?" "Complicated," I said, cutting straight to the point. "Lisa, I need some legal advice about business partnership structures and co-owner rights. Can we meet?" Lisa's tone shifted immediately to professional concern. "Of course. Are you having problems with Ryan?" "I'm having problems with understanding what my actual legal position is in our company," I replied carefully, "and what rights I have regarding financial transparency and business decision-making." We arranged to meet the following afternoon, giving me time to gather whatever documentation I could access independently. Lisa's final words stayed with me as I drove back to the office. "Emma, document everything. If you're questioning the legitimacy of your business partnership, you'll need evidence to support whatever action you decide to take." That afternoon, I began paying closer attention to the operational details I'd previously trusted Ryan to handle. When Patricia Thompson called to follow up on our dinner conversation, I answered my own phone instead of letting it route through our receptionist to Ryan's office. "Emma, perfect," Patricia said. "I wanted to confirm our meeting next week about the Bend office project. Should I have my assistant coordinate with yours?" "Actually, let's coordinate directly," I said, pulling up my calendar. "What works better for you, Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday morning?" The ease of direct communication reminded me how much I'd enjoyed working with clients before Ryan had inserted himself as an intermediary. Patricia and I had a natural professional chemistry, understanding each other's communication styles and priorities in a way that made collaboration effortless. "Emma," Patricia said as we finalized our meeting details, "I hope you don't mind my asking, but is everything all right with your business partnership? Last night felt a bit tense." Her directness caught me off guard, but I appreciated her concern. "We're working through some differences in our approach to client relationships," I said diplomatically. "Nothing that will affect our work quality or professional commitments." "Good," Patricia replied, "because I want you to know that our decision to expand our relationship with Richardson Design Studio is based entirely on our experience working with you. Your design expertise, project management skills, and communication style are exactly what we need for future projects." After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone, processing the implications of Patricia's words. She saw me as the primary point of contact for their ongoing relationship, valued my project management capabilities, and wanted to work with me directly on future projects. This contradicted everything Ryan had told me about client preferences and business protocols. The remainder of the afternoon brought more evidence of the systematic misdirection I'd been experiencing. An email thread between myself and the Henderson clients from 3 weeks earlier had somehow never reached me, with responses going directly to Ryan instead. A vendor inquiry about sustainable materials for an upcoming project had been forwarded to Ryan with a note about business-side decisions. Despite being directly related to design specifications I'd developed, most revealing was a conversation I overheard between Ryan and Brad Miller, a business consultant who'd been advising us on expansion strategies. They were discussing something called operational streamlining and role clarification in terms that suggested they'd been planning organizational changes without my input. The key is maintaining creative quality while improving business efficiency, Ryan was saying. Emma's incredibly talented, but the administrative side of client relations really isn't her strength. Consolidating those functions under unified leadership eliminates confusion and improves client confidence. I stood frozen outside Ryan's office, listening to my business partner discuss my supposed weaknesses with an outside consultant as if I were an employee whose job responsibilities were being reorganized, rather than a co-owner whose consent was required for major operational changes. Brad's response was equally illuminating. Smart approach. Creative types often resist business structure because they don't understand its value. Better to implement changes gradually so she can adjust to the new system without feeling like her role is being diminished. The calculated nature of what I was hearing made my stomach lurch. This wasn't accidental role creep or natural business evolution. This was a deliberate strategy to reduce my involvement in business operations while maintaining my creative output. Ryan and his consultant were discussing me like a valuable but difficult asset that needed careful management. I slipped away, before they could discover my eavesdropping, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd learned. The systematic exclusion from client communications, the redirection of business inquiries, the gradual transfer of operational responsibilities. None of it had been accidental. It had all been part of a plan to reshape our partnership into something that served Ryan's interests while undermining my position as an equal business owner. That evening, Ryan came home late, claiming he'd been working on proposal development for potential new clients. I was in our home office, supposedly reviewing design portfolios, but actually researching business partnership law and co-owner rights online. "How was your day?" he asked, leaning down to kiss my cheek as if the previous night's abandonment had never happened. "Interesting," I replied carefully. "I had a good conversation with Patricia Thompson about the Bend project. We're meeting next week to discuss initial concepts." Ryan's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. I should probably join that meeting. First impressions are crucial with expansion projects, and Patricia will want to discuss budget parameters and timeline expectations. Actually, she specifically requested to work directly with me, I said, watching his face in the reflection of my computer screen. She's comfortable with our communication style and wants to maintain that relationship for future projects. The silence that followed felt dangerous, charged with the same tension that had preceded his explosion that the night before. When I turned to face him, Ryan's expression was carefully controlled, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Emma," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I think last night's conversation got a bit heated, and maybe some things were said that created confusion about our professional roles, but we need to be clear about maintaining appropriate business protocols with major clients." "What protocols?" I asked directly. "Patricia hired us based on my design work and wants to continue working with me directly. What's inappropriate about that?" "What's inappropriate is circumventing the established business structure that's made our company successful," Ryan replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Clients need consistent points of contact for different aspects of their projects. When you start freelancing within our own company, it creates confusion and undermines our professional credibility." The phrase "freelancing within our own company" was so absurd that I almost laughed. "I'm not freelancing, Ryan. I'm doing the job I've always done, working directly with clients on projects that involve my expertise." "Your expertise is design," he said firmly. "Mine is business management. When you start overstepping into areas outside your competency, you put our entire operation at risk." There it was again, the casual dismissal of my business capabilities disguised as protective concern. But this time, instead of feeling hurt or defensive, I felt something else entirely. A cold, clear determination to understand exactly what Ryan thought he was protecting and why my professional competence was such a threat to him. "Maybe you're right," I said, my voice suddenly agreeable in a way that made Ryan relax visibly. Maybe I should focus more on understanding the business side of our operations. Would you mind showing me our current financial position? I'd love to see how profitable the Thompson project has been and what our projections look like for next quarter. Ryan's relief at my apparent capitulation was so obvious that I wondered how I'd missed his manipulative tactics for so long. Of course, sweetheart. I'll have Kevin prepare some reports for you to review. Nothing too detailed, just the highlights that would interest you. Actually, I said, maintaining my helpful tone, I'd prefer to review the complete financial records. As a business owner, I think I should understand our entire financial picture, not just the highlights. The mask slipped again, just for a moment, but long enough for me to see the calculation in his eyes as he decided how to handle my request. Complete financial records can be overwhelming if you're not used to business accounting. Why don't we start with summary reports, and if you want more detail after that, we can dig deeper. His resistance to financial transparency was now so obvious that I couldn't believe I'd accepted his previous deflections. A legitimate business partner would welcome his co-owner's interest in their financial position. Someone with something to hide would do exactly what Ryan was doing, offering limited information while discouraging deeper investigation. That sounds perfect, I agreed, smiling as if his suggestion had been exactly what I wanted. I'm sure you know best about how to present financial information in an understandable way. Ryan's smile in return was smug and satisfied, the expression of someone who believed he'd successfully managed a potentially difficult situation. As he left the office to pour himself a glass of wine, I turned back to my computer and continued, researching partnership agreements, co-owner rights, and the legal procedures for accessing complete business financial records. The woman who'd been abandoned in the rain was learning quickly, and she was discovering that the storm brewing around Ryan Richardson was going to be much worse than anything Portland's weather could produce. My meeting with Lisa Martinez took place at a small law office in Northwest Portland, far from the design district where Ryan and I might be recognized. Lisa had transformed from the ambitious law student I'd known in college into a sharp, professional attorney whose reputation for handling complex business disputes preceded her arrival in any room. She listened without interruption as I explained the systematic exclusion I'd discovered, taking notes on a yellow legal pad while maintaining the kind of neutral expression that probably served her well in courtrooms. Let me make sure I understand. The structure, Lisa said when I finished my initial explanation. You and Ryan are listed as equal co-owners of Richardson Design Studio. You founded the company together. You've both contributed to its growth, but he's gradually assumed control of all business operations while positioning your role as purely creative. That's exactly right, I confirmed. And when I tried to assert my involvement in client relationships, he became hostile and eventually abandoned me on a street corner 20 miles from home. Lisa's pen stopped moving. He what? I recounted. The events of that rainy evening, watching Lisa's professional composure slip into something more personal and concerned. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Emma, that's not just problematic business behavior. That's emotionally abusive treatment that suggests a pattern of control and manipulation. Have there been other incidents where he's used intimidation or punishment to maintain dominance? The question forced me to examine behaviors I'd previously rationalized as stress or misunderstandings. Ryan's tendency to withdraw affection when I disagreed with his decisions. His habit of scheduling important meetings during times when I had other commitments, then claiming my absence proved my lack of business commitment. The way he'd gradually moved conversations about our company's future away from collaborative planning toward his unilateral decision-making. Nothing as dramatic as abandoning me in the rain, I said slowly. But yes, there have been patterns of punishment when I don't comply with his preferences. Lisa nodded grimly. That context is important because it suggests his business behavior isn't separate from personal control issues. Now, regarding your legal position as a co-owner, you have extensive rights that it sounds like you haven't been exercising. She explained that as an equal partner in Richardson Design Studio, I had the legal right to access all business records, participate in all major decisions, and maintain direct relationships with clients and vendors. Ryan's attempts to limit my access to financial information or control my professional interactions weren't just ethically problematic. They potentially violated our partnership agreement and his fiduciary duties as a co-owner. I need to see your original partnership documents, Lisa continued. But assuming they establish you as equal partners, Ryan cannot unilaterally restructure your business roles or exclude you from operational decisions. If he's been redirecting income, hiding financial information, or making significant business changes without your consent, he may be violating multiple legal obligations. The conversation shifted to practical next steps. Lisa recommended that I immediately begin documenting every aspect of Ryan's behavior, from business decisions made without my input to personal incidents of controlling or manipulative treatment. She also suggested that I exercise my legal rights to demand complete financial transparency, including bank statements, client contracts, and any consulting agreements with outside advisors. The key is building a comprehensive picture of what's actually happening versus what Ryan claims is happening, Lisa explained. If this escalates to legal action, whether for business fraud or divorce proceedings, you'll need evidence that demonstrates a pattern of deception and control. We discussed the possibility that Ryan might be diverting company income for personal use or developing competing business interests without my knowledge. Lisa's questions about Brad Miller, the consultant I'd overheard discussing my operational streamlining, were particularly pointed. Consultants don't typically advise on employee management unless there are significant organizational changes being planned, she noted. If Ryan is paying for business consulting about restructuring your role without your knowledge, that's a major red flag about his intentions for your partnership. I left Lisa's office with a detailed plan for gathering evidence and asserting my business rights. The plan felt overwhelming in its scope, but also empowering in its clarity. For years, I'd accepted Ryan's version of our business relationship because I'd trusted his expertise and judgment. Now I would verify everything independently and make my own informed decisions about our partnership's future. The first step was exercising my right to review our complete business records. Lisa had prepared a formal letter requesting access to all financial documents, which I planned to present to Ryan that evening in a way that appeared collaborative rather than confrontational. The goal was obtaining information without alerting him to the extent of my legal research or my growing suspicions about his business practices. That afternoon, I called Kevin Roberts, our bookkeeper, and requested a meeting to discuss my increased involvement in the company's financial oversight. Kevin seemed surprised but pleased by my interest, mentioning that he'd always thought it unusual for a co-owner to be so uninvolved in financial management. Most business partners want to review the books regularly, Kevin said during our phone conversation. Ryan always said you preferred to focus on the creative side, but I figured eventually you'd want to understand the numbers better. We scheduled a meeting for the following week, giving me time to present my request to Ryan first and gauge his reaction. Kevin's willingness to discuss our finances directly contrasted sharply with Ryan's resistance to financial transparency, another piece of evidence that Ryan's behavior was unusual for a legitimate business partnership. My next call was to Patricia Thompson, ostensibly to confirm details for our upcoming meeting, but really to test whether Ryan had been intercepting or redirecting our professional communications. I used my direct office line rather than going through our receptionist, curious to see if the call would somehow reach Ryan instead of me. "Emma, perfect timing," Patricia said when she answered. "I was just reviewing the preliminary concepts we discussed for the Bend office. I have a few questions about the space planning that I'd love to run by you." The ease of our direct communication reinforced what I'd suspected. Patricia and I had an effective professional relationship that Ryan had been systematically undermining. Her questions about space planning were exactly the kind of practical design issues that required my expertise, not Ryan's business management skills. "I've been thinking about the employee wellness areas you proposed," Patricia continued. "The meditation room concept is brilliant, but I'm wondering about acoustic considerations given the open office layout. Have you worked with sound dampening in similar spaces?" Her question demonstrated a level of detailed project engagement that contradicted Ryan's claims about needing to shield me from complex client discussions. Patricia understood both the creative and practical aspects of design implementation, and our conversation flowed naturally between aesthetic considerations and functional requirements. "Actually," Patricia said as our conversation wound down, "I've been meaning to ask about your availability for a larger project we're considering. Thompson Industries is looking at acquiring a smaller company whose office space would need complete renovation. The timeline would be aggressive, but the budget is substantial. Would you be interested in discussing it?" This was exactly the E2DE kind of opportunity that Ryan had claimed required his business management expertise to handle properly. Yet Patricia was presenting it directly to me, clearly expecting that I would manage both the creative and business aspects of such a significant project. "I'd definitely be interested," I replied. "Why don't we discuss it during our meeting next week? And I can prepare some initial thoughts about timeline and approach." "Perfect," Patricia said. "And Emma, I want you to know how much we appreciate working with someone who understands both the artistic vision and the practical realities of commercial design. It's a rare combination." After hanging up, I sat in my office contemplating the disconnect between Patricia's perception of my capabilities and Ryan's insistence that I lacked business acumen. The most reasonable explanation was that Ryan had been deliberately misrepresenting my skills and role to maintain his position as the indispensable business leader. The afternoon brought an unexpected opportunity to test my growing suspicions about Ryan's financial management. Marcus Chen stopped by my office with questions about an invoice discrepancy for the Henderson project. According to his records, we'd been billed for premium materials that were significantly more expensive than what had actually been installed. "I wouldn't normally bother you with this kind of thing," Marcus said apologetically. "But the numbers don't add up, and Ryan's been in meetings all afternoon. I thought maybe you'd know about a material upgrade that didn't get communicated to our installation team." I reviewed the invoice Marcus showed me, noting that the premium materials in question would have required my approval since they involved significant design changes. No such upgrade had been discussed or implemented, which meant either the vendor had made a billing error or someone had authorized charges for materials that were never delivered. "Let me look into this," I told Marcus. "Can you email me copies of all the invoices for the Henderson project? I want to review the entire material cost breakdown." Marcus's relief was obvious. "That would be great. I've been trying to reconcile these numbers for weeks, but some of the charges don't match what was actually installed." As Marcus left, I realized I'd just uncovered what might be evidence of financial irregularities in our project billing. If Ryan had been approving charges for materials that weren't delivered, either he was being careless with our financial oversight, or he was involved in some kind of billing manipulation with our vendors. I spent the remainder of the afternoon reviewing project files and vendor communications, looking for other discrepancies between what was billed and what was delivered. The Henderson project wasn't an isolated case. Multiple recent projects showed similar patterns of charges that didn't align with actual materials used or services provided. The most troubling discovery was a series of payments to vendors for design consultation services that I'd never authorized or received. According to our records, we'd paid substantial fees for specialized design expertise on projects where I'd handled all creative development independently. Either these payments represented services I wasn't aware of, which would be strange given my involvement in all design decisions, or they represented something else entirely. The possibility that Ryan was creating false charges or diverting company funds through vendor manipulation made my stomach clench with anxiety and anger. When Ryan returned from his afternoon meetings, I was ready to present my request for financial transparency in the collaborative tone Lisa had recommended. I found him in his office, reviewing what appeared to be contract documents with Brad Miller, the consultant whose conversation I'd overheard about operational streamlining. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, maintaining a friendly demeanor despite my growing suspicions about both men. "Ryan, when you have a few minutes, I'd like to discuss my involvement in our financial oversight." Brad looked up with interest, his expression suggesting he recognized me as the subject of their previous discussions about role clarification. "Emma, right? Ryan's told me so much about your incredible design work. You've built quite a reputation in the Portland market." His familiarity with my professional reputation, combined with what I'd overheard about managing creative types who don't understand business structure, made me wonder exactly what Ryan had told this consultant about our partnership dynamics. "Thank you," I replied politely. "I understand you've been advising us on business development strategies. That's exactly why I'm interested in becoming more involved in our operational planning." The quick glance that passed between Ryan and Brad was almost imperceptible, but I caught it. Whatever they'd been discussing, my interest in business involvement wasn't part of their preferred scenario. "We can definitely talk about that," Ryan said smoothly. Brad was just leaving, actually. "Why don't you come back in about 10 minutes? I agreed, but lingered in the hallway long enough to overhear their hurried conversation as Brad prepared to leave. "This is exactly what we discussed," Brad was saying quietly. "Creative partners often become interested in business operations when they sense changes happening. The key is channeling that interest into appropriate areas that don't interfere with strategic planning." "I know," Ryan replied. "She's been asking about financial records, but I can handle that with summary reports and simplified overviews. The last thing we need is her getting overwhelmed by complex business details and making emotional decisions that hurt our growth strategy." Their casual discussion of managing my business involvement as if I were a problematic employee rather than an equal partner crystallized my understanding of what had been happening. Ryan hadn't been protecting me from business complexities out of consideration for my preferences. He'd been excluding me from business operations to maintain his own control and implement strategic changes without my input or consent. When I returned to Ryan's office, I presented Lisa's formal request for complete financial records as if it were my own idea for becoming a more engaged business partner. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "You're absolutely right that I should understand our business operations better. I'd like to review our complete financial records so I can be more helpful with strategic planning." Ryan's smile was pleased and patronizing. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I think you'll find the financial side of business really interesting once you get into it. Let me have Kevin prepare some reports that will give you a good overview of our position." "Actually," I said, maintaining my helpful tone, "I'd prefer to review the original documents myself. Bank statements, client contracts, vendor agreements, the works. That way I can ask intelligent questions and really understand how everything fits together." The pause that followed was brief but telling. Ryan's expression remained pleasant, but I could see him calculating the best way to deflect my request, without seeming unreasonable. "Of course you can review everything," he said finally. "But original financial documents can be pretty overwhelming if you're not used to business accounting. Why don't we start with organized summaries, and then if you want to dig deeper into specific areas, we can look at the source documents together." His insistence on filtering my access to our own business records was now so transparent that I marveled at how I'd previously accepted his explanations. A legitimate business partner would simply provide the requested documents and offer to answer questions about anything confusing. "That makes sense," I agreed, as if his suggestion were exactly what I wanted. "When do you think those summaries could be ready?" "I'll have Kevin put something together by early next week," Ryan promised. "And Emma, I'm really glad you're taking more interest in this side of our business. It'll make our partnership even stronger." His satisfaction was obvious, the expression of someone who believed he'd successfully managed another potentially difficult situation. As I left his office, I felt a cold clarity about the true nature of our partnership and Ryan's intentions for our business future. That evening, I drove to an office supply store across town and purchased a small digital recorder, a locking file box, and several notebooks for documenting my investigation. At home, I set up a secure workspace in our guest room, hidden behind winter clothes in the closet where Ryan would be unlikely to discover it. I began by documenting everything I could remember about our business relationship's evolution, noting specific incidents where Ryan had claimed credit for my work, excluded me from important decisions, or misrepresented my role to clients and vendors. The exercise was illuminating and depressing, revealing a pattern of systematic diminishment that had been so gradual I'd barely noticed it happening. Next, I created a timeline of our company's major clients and projects, noting which ones I'd developed independently versus which ones Ryan had brought to our company. The results were striking. Nearly every significant client relationship had originated through my design work, industry connections, or referrals from satisfied customers who'd worked directly with me. The Thompson Industries project, our most valuable contract, had come to us specifically because Patricia had seen my work at the Heathman Hotel and wanted to hire me personally. The Henderson project had resulted from a referral by previous clients who'd been impressed with my problem-solving during a challenging renovation. Even smaller projects consistently traced back to my professional reputation and client relationships. Yet Ryan had positioned himself as the business development expert, whose client management skills were essential to our success. The disconnect between reality and his narrative was so complete that I wondered whether he'd convinced himself of his own version of our partnership's dynamics. The financial irregularities Marcus had shown me represented another troubling pattern. I spent hours reviewing every project file I could access, documenting discrepancies between billing records and actual work performed. The evidence suggested either systematic vendor fraud that Ryan was failing to catch, or deliberate financial manipulation that he was actively orchestrating. By midnight, I had filled 3 notebooks with evidence of Ryan's misrepresentation of our business operations, his systematic exclusion of me from decision-making, and potential financial irregularities that warranted serious investigation. The woman who'd trusted her business partner completely had been naive and careless. The woman documenting evidence for potential legal action was neither. The next morning brought an email from Patricia Thompson's assistant, requesting to schedule additional meetings about not just the Bend office project, but the potential acquisition renovation she'd mentioned during our phone conversation. The email was addressed directly to me and requested that I prepare preliminary concepts and timeline estimates for both projects. I printed the email and added it to my evidence file, another piece of documentation that contradicted Ryan's claims about appropriate client communication protocols. Major clients were seeking to work with me directly on significant projects, trusting my expertise for both creative and business aspects of design implementation. When Ryan saw me preparing materials for the Patricia Thompson meetings, his reaction was immediate and predictable. "I should probably join those meetings," he said, appearing at my desk with that familiar expression of protective concern. Multiple projects with the same client can get complicated quickly. Timeline coordination, budget management, resource allocation. There are a lot of moving parts that require careful oversight. "I think I can handle it," I replied calmly. "Patricia and I communicate well, and she specifically requested to work with me directly on project development." Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. "Emma, I know you think you can handle everything independently, but business relationships require consistent management strategies. When you start freelancing with major clients, it creates confusion about our company's structure and protocols." There was that phrase again, freelancing with our own clients. Ryan had become so convinced of his indispensability that he viewed my direct client relationships as unauthorized independent work rather than normal business operations for a company co-owner. "I'm not freelancing," I said firmly. "I'm doing my job as a business owner and lead designer." Patricia Thompson hired Richardson Design Studio because of my work, and she wants to continue that professional relationship. Patricia Thompson hired Richardson Design Studio, Ryan corrected. "Not Emma Richardson's design services. There's a difference, and maintaining that distinction is crucial for our company's credibility." His need to diminish my professional relationships had become so compulsive that he was now arguing that my own clients didn't actually want to work with me personally. The absurdity would have been funny if it weren't so revealing about his perception of my role in our supposedly equal partnership. "Fine," I said, appearing to capitulate. "Why, don't you prepare a proposal for how you think we should handle the Thompson Industries projects? I'd like to see your strategic approach to managing multiple concurrent contracts with the same client." Ryan's relief was immediate and obvious. "That's a great idea. I'll put together a comprehensive project management framework that addresses timeline coordination, resource allocation, and client communication protocols. You'll see how much more efficient things can be with proper business structure." As he walked away, already planning his presentation of management strategies for projects that existed entirely because of my professional relationships and design expertise, I felt the last pieces of my naivety dissolving completely. Ryan Richardson believed he was managing a valuable but difficult creative asset, not partnering with an equal business owner. He was planning to restructure our company in ways that would eliminate my independent client relationships while maintaining my creative output under his control. The consultant sessions about operational streamlining and managing creative types who don't understand business structure weren't theoretical discussions. They were planning sessions for systematically removing me from business ownership while keeping me as a controlled employee. The storm that had started with my abandonment in the rain was about to become a hurricane that would wash away everything Ryan thought he'd built while I wasn't paying attention. But first, I needed to gather enough evidence to ensure that when the winds started blowing, I would be the one left standing when they finally stopped. The following Monday arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that made Portland's reputation for eternal rain seem like a myth. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a tailored charcoal suit that commanded respect while maintaining an approachable professionalism. Today would be the day I began implementing the strategy Lisa and I had developed, starting with my scheduled meeting with Kevin Roberts to review our complete financial records. Kevin's office occupied a small space in the building adjacent. 2 hours, cluttered with filing cabinets and multiple computer monitors displaying spreadsheets that tracked the financial life of several small businesses. He greeted me with genuine enthusiasm, clearly pleased that one of his clients was finally taking active interest in understanding their company's financial position. "I've got everything organized for you," Kevin said, gesturing to several thick folders arranged on his conference table. Bank statements, profit and loss reports, client payment records, vendor expenses, the whole picture. "I figured we'd start with an overview of your current position, and then dig into whatever areas interest you most." The first revelation was immediate and startling. Richardson Design Studio was significantly more profitable than Ryan had ever indicated. Our revenue for the current year was nearly double what he'd mentioned during our infrequent financial discussions, and our profit margins were substantially higher than what I'd believed our industry standard to be. "These numbers look incredible," I said, studying the quarterly reports Kevin had prepared. "I had no idea our revenue had grown this much." Kevin looked surprised. "Really? I mean, you guys have had an amazing year. The Thompson Industries contract alone brought in more revenue than some of my clients see in 2 years. Plus, all the referral business that's been spinning off from your major projects." As we worked through the financial documents, several patterns emerged that made my stomach tighten with anxiety and anger. First, there were regular transfers from our business accounts to a separate account I'd never heard of, labeled simply as operational expenses in Kevin's records, but without any detailed breakdown of what these expenses covered. "What are these operational expenses?" I asked, pointing to transfers that occurred monthly and represented substantial portions of our profit. Kevin consulted his notes. "Ryan handles those directly. He told me they cover business development, marketing, initiatives, consultant fees, things like that. I don't have detailed breakdowns because he manages those expenditures through a separate account system." The separate account system was news to me. As a co-owner, I should have been aware of any business accounts and their purposes. The fact that Ryan was managing significant company funds through accounts I didn't know about represented a serious breach of partnership transparency. More troubling were the consultant fees Kevin mentioned. According to his records, we'd been paying Brad Miller's consulting firm substantial monthly retainers for nearly 8 months, representing tens of thousands of dollars in fees for services I'd never authorized or received reports about. "Brad Miller's been consulting for us for 8 months?" I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral despite my growing alarm. "Yeah, pretty substantial engagement too," Kevin replied, pulling up the payment records. Ryan said it was for strategic planning and business development. Operational restructuring, I think he called it. The timeline was damning. Ryan had been paying for consulting advice about restructuring our operations since last spring, months before my involvement in business decisions had become a point of conflict. This suggested that his systematic exclusion of me from company management hadn't been a gradual evolution, but a planned strategy that he'd been implementing with professional guidance. Kevin showed me vendor payment records that corroborated the billing discrepancies Marcus had discovered. Multiple payments to suppliers for materials and services that either hadn't been delivered or had been delivered at significantly lower costs than what we'd been charged. When I asked Kevin about his oversight of these expenses, his response was illuminating. "I process the payments Ryan approves, but I don't verify delivery or installation details," Kevin explained. "That's supposed to be handled on the project management side. If Ryan signs off on an invoice, I assume the work was completed and the charges are accurate." The system Kevin described created perfect conditions for financial manipulation. Ryan could approve inflated or fraudulent vendor charges. Kevin would process the payments without verification, and I was excluded from oversight that might catch discrepancies. Whether Ryan was being defrauded by vendors or actively participating in billing manipulation, his failure to implement proper financial controls was either gross negligence or deliberate malfeasance. The most shocking discovery came when Kevin showed me our client payment records. Several major clients, including Thompson Industries, had been making additional payments beyond their contracted project fees. These payments were labeled as bonus compensation or satisfaction premiums and represented substantial sums that I'd never been informed about. "Thompson Industries paid us a $50,000 satisfaction bonus?" I asked, staring at the payment record dated just 2 weeks after our project completion. "Yeah, they were thrilled with the results," Kevin said. Patricia Thompson called Ryan personally to arrange the bonus payment, said it was the most successful office renovation they'd ever experienced, and wanted to compensate us for exceeding expectations. Patricia Thompson had never mentioned any bonus payment during our conversations about the project's success. More significantly, as the designer who'd created the concepts and managed the implementation that earned this bonus, I should have been informed about additional compensation for my work. By the end of our 3-hour meeting, I had documented evidence of multiple financial irregularities that represented either systematic fraud or gross financial mismanagement on Ryan's part. The operational expenses being funneled through secret accounts, the consultant fees for services aimed at restructuring my role without my knowledge, the vendor payments that didn't match delivered services, and the client bonus payments that had been concealed from me painted a picture of deliberate financial deception. "Kevin," I said as we concluded our meeting, "I need copies of all these records for my own review. Can you prepare complete documentation of our financial position for the past 18 months? "Of course," Kevin replied, "though I should probably let Ryan know I'm providing complete records to you, just to keep communication clear." "Actually," I said, maintaining my collaborative tone, "this is part of a surprise I'm planning for Ryan. I want to present a comprehensive analysis of our business position as a gift for our anniversary next month. Could you keep this between us until then?" Kevin's smile was warm and conspiratorial. "That's really sweet. Yeah, I can definitely keep this confidential. He'll be so impressed that you've taken such interest in the business side." Leaving Kevin's office with a briefcase full of financial documentation, I felt the peculiar combination of validation and betrayal that comes with having your worst suspicions confirmed. Ryan hadn't just been excluding me from business decisions. He'd been systematically deceiving me about our company's financial position while potentially defrauding our business through various manipulation schemes. My next stop was the Pearl District office building, where Patricia Thompson's company occupied 3 floors of premium downtown space. Patricia had agreed to meet me for coffee in the building's lobby cafe, ostensibly to discuss the Bend office project, but really to test my growing suspicions about Ryan's misrepresentation of our client relationships. Patricia arrived precisely on time, looking polished and energetic in the way that successful executives always seem to manage regardless of their schedules. She greeted me with genuine warmth, immediately launching into enthusiastic descriptions of how much her employees were enjoying their renovated workspace. "The productivity improvements have been measurable," Patricia told me as we settled at a corner table with our coffee. "But more importantly, the qualitative feedback has been incredible. People genuinely love coming to work now. The space feels inspiring rather than institutional." As our conversation progressed, I carefully steered the discussion toward our working relationship during the project implementation. Patricia's responses consistently contradicted Ryan's version of events, revealing the extent to which he'd been misrepresenting our professional dynamics. "I have to say," Patricia continued, "your approach to project management was refreshing. So many designers hand off the business details to account managers or project coordinators, but you understood both the creative vision and the practical implementation requirements. It made communication incredibly efficient. I'm glad our communication worked well," I replied carefully. "Ryan sometimes suggests that clients prefer working with him on the business aspects while I handle creative development." Patricia's expression shifted to confusion. "Really? I mean, Ryan was certainly professional and helpful when we needed to coordinate with your office systems, but you were definitely our primary contact for all major decisions, creative and logistical." She went on to describe specific conversations we'd had about budget adjustments, timeline modifications, and vendor coordination, all of which Ryan had presented to me as his own client management activities. Patricia's recollections made it clear that I'd been handling comprehensive project management while Ryan had played a supporting administrative role. "Actually," Patricia said, lowering her voice slightly, "I was a bit surprised by Ryan's behavior at our dinner last month. He seemed to be trying to claim credit for work that I knew you'd handled directly. It was awkward enough that David and I discussed it afterward." Her observation confirmed that Ryan's attempts to diminish my role had been obvious to clients, not just to me. Professional relationships that I'd built through competent service delivery were being undermined by Ryan's need to position himself as the indispensable business leader. "Patricia," I said, deciding to test the waters with a direct question. "When Thompson Industries made the satisfaction bonus payment for our project, was that decision based on specific aspects of our service delivery?" Patricia's face lit up with pride. "Absolutely. The transformation exceeded every expectation we had. Employee satisfaction, productivity metrics, recruitment advantages, everything we'd hoped for and more. That bonus was specifically recognition of exceptional design work and project management. "I appreciate that feedback," I said, noting that Patricia clearly remembered the bonus payment and seemed proud of having arranged it. Recognition for exceptional work means a lot to any professional. "As it should," Patricia agreed. "Outstanding. Results deserve outstanding compensation." I hope Ryan shared our feedback about why we felt the bonus was warranted. Her assumption that Ryan had communicated their feedback to me was telling. Patricia had intended for me to know about both the bonus payment and the specific reasons Thompson Industries had chosen to provide additional compensation. Ryan's failure to share this information represented another deliberate deception about our professional relationship and financial success. Our conversation about the Bend office project revealed additional information that contradicted Ryan's version of our business development process. Patricia explained that she'd already spoken with 3 other executives about our design services, providing them with my direct contact information and encouraging them to reach out about their own renovation needs. "I hope that's appropriate," Patricia said. "I assumed you'd want to handle those initial conversations directly since you understand both the creative and business aspects of what we accomplished together." "That's perfect," I assured her. "Direct referrals are always the most effective way to develop new client relationships." As we concluded our meeting, Patricia handed me a business card with additional contact information. "This is my direct cell number," she said. "If you ever decide to expand beyond Portland or want to discuss larger commercial projects, I have connections throughout the Pacific Northwest who would be interested in your services." The card represented something beyond a professional contact. It was evidence of the kind of client loyalty and business development that Ryan claimed required his management expertise. Patricia Thompson valued our working relationship specifically because of my comprehensive capabilities, and she was actively referring new business opportunities based on that professional respect. Driving back to our office, I processed the implications of my morning's discoveries. Kevin's financial records had documented systematic deception about our company's profitability, unexplained transfers to secret accounts, and concealed bonus payments. Patricia's conversation had confirmed that major clients viewed me as their primary contact and were actively referring new business based on our direct professional relationship. Ryan's narrative about his indispensable business management role was not just exaggerated, it was largely fictional. Our company's success was built on my design expertise, project management capabilities, and client relationships, while Ryan's contributions appeared to involve primarily financial manipulation and credit appropriation. That afternoon, I received a call from Sarah Williams requesting an urgent meeting about staffing concerns. Sarah had been our project coordinator since our second year in business, and her institutional knowledge of our operations made her perspective valuable for understanding how our company dynamics had evolved. We met at a small restaurant near our office, far enough away to ensure privacy, but close enough to seem like a routine business lunch. Sarah's nervousness was obvious as she explained that several employees had approached her with concerns about recent changes in company culture and communication protocols. "People are confused about reporting structures," Sarah explained quietly. "Ryan's been giving directions about projects that sometimes contradict your design specifications. When staff members ask for clarification, they're told to check with Ryan first before bringing questions to you." The systematic redirection of staff communication represented another layer of Ryan's control strategy. By positioning himself as the primary authority for all business decisions, he was effectively isolating me from day-to-day operational management while maintaining the appearance of collaborative leadership. Sarah described specific incidents where Ryan had modified project timelines or vendor selections without consulting me, then instructed staff to implement changes that compromised design quality or client satisfaction. When employees questioned these modifications, they were told that business efficiency sometimes required practical compromises to artistic preferences. "The thing is," Sarah continued, Most of these business efficiency decisions actually create more work and complicate project delivery. It's like Ryan doesn't understand how the creative and logistical aspects of our projects interconnect. Her observation was astute and damning. Ryan's attempts to assert business leadership were actually reducing operational efficiency because he lacked understanding of how design decisions affected practical implementation. His interventions created problems that I then had to solve without being informed about the original modifications that had caused them. Sarah also confirmed my suspicions about Brad Miller's consulting engagement. According to her observations, Brad had been meeting regularly with Ryan to discuss organizational restructuring, employee management strategies, and what Sarah described as optimizing creative resource allocation. "I think Brad's been advising Ryan about managing creative professionals," Sarah said delicately. "Some of the changes in how projects are structured feel like they're designed to limit your direct involvement in business operations." The euphemistic language couldn't disguise what Sarah was describing: professional consultation about reducing my role while maintaining my creative output. Ryan had been paying substantial fees for advice about systematically marginalizing his business partner and wife. Our conversation concluded with Sarah providing me with copies of internal communications that documented Ryan's unilateral decision-making and the resulting operational complications. Her willingness to share this information reflected the loyalty of staff members who'd worked closely with me and witnessed the quality of my professional judgment. "Emma," Sarah said as we prepared to leave, "I hope you know that the people who've worked here for any length of time understand who really built this company's reputation. Whatever's happening between you and Ryan, don't let him convince you that your role isn't essential." Her words were meant to be supportive, but they highlighted how visible our business relationship problems had become to our employees. The systematic exclusion and credit appropriation that I'd initially thought was subtle had been obvious to staff members who worked with both of us daily. That evening, I organized all the evidence I'd gathered into comprehensive documentation of Ryan's deceptive practices. Financial records that proved systematic concealment of company profits and unauthorized expense management. Client communications that contradicted his claims about business development and relationship management. Employee observations that confirmed his deliberate isolation of me from operational authority. The woman who'd trusted her business partners' expertise and judgment had been systematically betrayed and deceived. The woman preparing for strategic action had evidence sufficient to expose every aspect of Ryan's misconduct and reclaim control of the company she'd actually built. As I sat in our guest room organizing documents and preparing legal strategy, I could hear Ryan downstairs taking a phone call with Brad Miller about their next consulting session. Their conversation, audible through our home's ventilation system, focused on timeline considerations for implementing what Brad called the transition to optimized leadership structure. They were discussing a timeline for completing Ryan's takeover of our business operations, apparently assuming that I would continue accepting gradual marginalization without resistance. The irony was perfect. While Ryan planned to eliminate my business authority, I was gathering evidence that would eliminate his. The storm that had started with my abandonment in the rain was now a carefully orchestrated hurricane with Ryan positioned directly in its path. Unlike the natural storm that had soaked me that November evening, this one would be controlled entirely by me, and Ryan Richardson would discover that some storms are designed to wash away everything built on false foundations. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of the end for Ryan's version of our partnership. The woman he'd underestimated was about to demonstrate exactly what happened when you left Emma Richardson standing in the rain with time to think about justice. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of relentless downpour that transformed Portland's streets into rivers and made stepping outside feel like entering a car wash. The irony wasn't lost on me as I prepared for what would be the most important day in my professional life. 6 weeks had passed since Ryan left me stranded in a storm not unlike this one, and today I would make sure he experienced his own tempest. I dressed with military precision, choosing a navy power suit that commanded authority and respect. Every detail was calculated. The vintage Cartier watch that had belonged to my grandmother, the pearl earrings that suggested old money and established taste, the Italian leather briefcase that held enough evidence to destroy Ryan's carefully constructed fiction about our business partnership. I looked like exactly what I was, a successful businesswoman who'd built something valuable and wasn't about to let anyone steal it. The plan Lisa and I had developed would unfold in 3 carefully orchestrated phases throughout the day. First, I would present my demands for immediate financial transparency and operational changes during our regularly scheduled staff meeting. Second, I would reveal selected evidence of Ryan's deceptive practices to key employees and clients, establishing a foundation of support for the changes I was implementing. Finally, I would deliver the ultimate revelation during our appointment with Thompson Industries, where Patricia and her team were expecting to discuss expanded business relationships. Ryan was already at the office when I arrived, looking confident and relaxed as he prepared for what he expected to be another routine day of managing his business operations while his wife focused on creative work. His casual demeanor would make the morning's events even more satisfying. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, barely looking up from his computer as I entered the building. "Terrible weather out there. Maybe you should have stayed home today." His suggestion that I avoid the office due to rain carried undertones that weren't lost on me. Ryan had used weather as an excuse to exclude me from business activities before, and his casual dismissal reminded me exactly why this confrontation was necessary. "Actually, I wouldn't miss today for anything," I replied, my voice carrying an edge that made him glance up with curiosity. "We have some important business to discuss." Our staff meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the main conference room, a weekly gathering where Ryan typically dominated discussion while I provided updates on creative projects. Today's meeting would follow a very different format. I arrived early to arrange documents and prepare the presentation that would reshape everyone's understanding of our company's true dynamics. Sarah Williams entered first, followed by Marcus, Chen, Kevin Roberts, and 3 other key employees who formed the core of our operational team. Ryan arrived last, carrying his usual coffee and notepad, expecting another routine gathering. "Before we begin with the usual updates," I announced, standing at the head of the conference table, "I need to address some significant operational changes that will be implemented immediately." Ryan's expression shifted from casual attention to sharp focus. "Operational changes? Emma, we haven't discussed any major modifications to our business structure." "That's exactly the problem," I replied, opening my briefcase and distributing copies of the financial documentation Kevin had provided. As co-owner of Richardson Design Studio, I've been systematically excluded from business operations and financial oversight. That exclusion ends today. The room fell silent as employees processed my words and began reviewing the financial documents I'd distributed. Ryan's face went through a rapid sequence of emotions: confusion, alarm, anger, and finally calculation as he tried to determine how to regain control of the situation. "These financial records show that our company has been significantly more profitable than I was led to believe," I continued, addressing the staff directly. "They also reveal substantial expenses and account transfers that I was never informed about despite being an equal partner in this business." Kevin Roberts looked deeply uncomfortable as he realized his confidential consultation with me was being revealed in front of Ryan, but his discomfort couldn't override the evidence in front of everyone. Evidence that showed monthly transfers to accounts I'd never heard of, and consultant fees for services aimed at restructuring my role without my knowledge. Ryan stood abruptly, his professional composure cracking. "Emma, this is neither the time nor the place for this kind of discussion. If you have concerns about our financial management, we should address them privately." "Privacy is exactly how these problems developed," I responded firmly. "Our employees deserve to understand the business structure they're working within, and our clients deserve transparent communication about who they're actually working with." I turned to Sarah Williams, who was studying the documentation with growing understanding. Sarah, you've observed changes in our operational protocols over the past year. Have those changes improved our project delivery and client satisfaction? Sarah's hesitation was brief but telling. Actually, no. The additional layers of approval and communication routing have created delays and complications that didn't exist before. Her response provided the opening I needed to present the evidence of Ryan's systematic interference with operational efficiency. I distributed copies of the project modification documents Sarah had provided, showing how Ryan's unilateral decisions had created problems that compromised both project quality and client relationships. These documents show a pattern of decision-making that excludes the company's lead designer from choices that directly affect design implementation, I explained. Vendor selections changed without consultation. Timeline modifications made without understanding their impact on creative development. Client communications filtered through intermediaries instead of direct professional relationships. Marcus, Chen, our contractor coordinator, nodded grimly as he recognized several of the incidents documented in my evidence. Some of these changes created real problems on job sites, he said quietly. We've had to redo work and manage client complaints that could have been avoided with better communication. Ryan's attempts to regain control of the meeting were becoming increasingly desperate. This is completely inappropriate, he said, his voice rising. Airing internal business disputes in front of our staff creates unnecessary drama and undermines our professional credibility. What undermines our professional credibility, I replied calmly, is systematic deception about our business operations and financial position. Our employees have the right to understand the company they work for, and our clients have the right to transparent communication about who they're hiring. I opened the second folder of evidence, containing documentation of the vendor payment irregularities Marcus had originally discovered. These records show multiple instances of charges for materials and services that either weren't delivered or were delivered at costs significantly lower than what we were billed. The financial discrepancies were undeniable, and Kevin's obvious discomfort confirmed that he'd been processing payments without proper verification of services received. Whether Ryan was being defrauded by vendors or participating in billing manipulation, his failure to implement proper financial controls represented either gross negligence or deliberate malfeasance. Furthermore, I continued, our bookkeeper has confirmed that several major clients, including Thompson Industries, have made satisfaction bonus payments that I was never informed about. As the designer responsible for the work that earned these bonuses, I should have been notified of additional compensation for exceptional performance. Ryan's face had gone pale as he realized the extent of the evidence I'd assembled. His carefully constructed narrative about indispensable business management was crumbling in front of the employees he'd convinced that my role was purely creative. Emma, he said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining composure. You're clearly upset about our personal situation, but involving our business and employees in marital disputes is unprofessional and destructive. His attempt to frame my business concerns as emotional overreaction was predictable but ineffective given the concrete evidence spread across the conference table. Financial records, client communications, and employee observations painted a clear picture of systematic deception that had nothing to do with personal relationships and everything to do with professional misconduct. This isn't about our marriage, I replied. This is about business fraud, partnership violations, and financial deception. These issues would be serious regardless of our personal relationship. The meeting continued for another hour as I methodically presented evidence of Ryan's various deceptions and outlined the immediate changes I was implementing. Direct client communication would be restored to appropriate professional relationships. Financial oversight would include my active participation in all business decisions. Vendor payments would require verification of services delivered before approval. Most importantly, I announced that I would be exercising my full rights as co-owner, including direct participation in client relationships, strategic planning, and business development activities. The days of Ryan filtering my professional interactions through his interpretation of appropriate business protocols were permanently ended. The staff's reaction was mixed, but generally supportive. Employees who'd worked with me for years seemed relieved that obvious operational problems were finally being addressed. Those who'd been hired more recently appeared confused by the dramatic shift in company dynamics, but willing to adapt to clearer leadership structure. Ryan's final attempt to salvage his position was revealing in its desperation. What Emma is proposing will create chaos and confusion for our clients, he argued. Business relationships require consistency and clear chains of command. When creative professionals try to handle business operations without proper training, mistakes are inevitable. His condescending dismissal of my business capabilities, delivered in front of employees who'd witnessed my successful project management for years, demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking that had created our current crisis. Ryan genuinely believed that creative expertise and business acumen were mutually exclusive, and that his interference was protecting our company from my artistic impracticality. The only confusion for our clients, I responded, has been created by misrepresentation of our working relationships and unnecessary barriers to direct communication. Our most successful projects have involved direct collaboration between myself and clients who appreciate both creative vision and practical implementation. As the staff meeting concluded, I could see employees processing the dramatic revelations and considering their implications for daily operations. Some seemed energized by the prospect of clearer communication and more efficient project management. Others appeared anxious about potential instability during the transition period. Ryan lingered after the others had left, his expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and calculation. "You realize what you've just done," he said quietly. "You've destroyed years of carefully built business relationships and operational structures. I've restored transparency to a business partnership that was built on deception," I corrected. "The structures you built were designed to exclude me from my own company while appropriating credit for my work." "Your work?" Ryan's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Emma, you design pretty spaces. I built a business. There's a difference between having artistic talent and understanding how to monetize that talent in a competitive market." His casual reduction of my professional expertise to designing pretty spaces encapsulated everything wrong with his perception of our partnership. Ryan saw me as a valuable but limited resource rather than an equal collaborator, and his business strategies had been designed to exploit my creativity while minimizing my authority. "We'll see what clients think about your business building skills," I said, gathering my documents. "Our afternoon meeting with Thompson Industries should be illuminating." Ryan's confidence faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "Patricia Thompson specifically requested this meeting to discuss expanded business relationships based on our successful collaboration," I explained. "She'll be interested to learn about the operational changes we're implementing and how they'll improve our service delivery." The Thompson Industries meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at their downtown offices, giving me several hours to prepare for the most crucial presentation of my professional life. Patricia had arranged for her entire executive team to attend, suggesting that significant business opportunities were being considered based on our track record of successful collaboration. During lunch, I drove to Lisa Martinez's office for final consultation about the legal implications of the confrontation I'd initiated. Lisa reviewed my documentation of the morning's events and confirmed that I'd established a strong foundation for asserting my co-ownership rights while exposing Ryan's pattern of deceptive practices. "The key now is maintaining your position, while he inevitably tries to retaliate," Lisa advised. "Document everything he does in response to your demands, and be prepared for him to escalate his attempts to exclude you from business operations." We discussed the possibility that Ryan might try to claim that my confrontational approach was damaging client relationships or creating operational instability. Lisa's recommendation was to focus on concrete business results and client satisfaction, rather than internal company dynamics. Let your work speak for itself, she suggested. If clients are happy with your professional relationship and your projects continue meeting their expectations, Ryan's claims about business disruption become irrelevant. The afternoon meeting with Thompson Industries took place in their executive conference room, a space I'd helped design during our headquarters renovation. Patricia Thompson greeted me with enthusiasm, clearly excited about discussing potential expansion of our business relationship. "Emma, you look fantastic," Patricia said as I entered the room. "I hope you're ready to talk about some exciting opportunities." Ryan arrived several minutes later, looking polished and professional, but with visible tension around his eyes. His greeting to Patricia was warm but slightly forced, suggesting he was struggling to maintain his usual charm while processing the morning's dramatic revelations. "Before we discuss new projects," I announced as everyone settled around the conference table, "I wanted to update you on some operational improvements we're implementing at Richardson Design Studio." Patricia's expression showed polite interest, but I could see her picking up on the undercurrents of tension between Ryan and me. Her business instincts were clearly registering that something significant was happening beyond routine operational adjustments. "We've restructured our client communication protocols to ensure more direct and efficient collaboration," I continued. "Going forward, I'll be handling all aspects of client relationships personally, from initial consultation through project completion and ongoing support." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he couldn't object without seeming to argue against improved client service. Patricia's response was immediately positive, confirming my assessment of her preferences for our working relationship. "That's wonderful," Patricia said. "Our experience working directly with you has been exceptional. Having a single point of contact who understands both creative and practical aspects of project implementation makes everything so much more efficient." Her endorsement provided the perfect opening to present evidence of our successful collaboration that contradicted Ryan's claims about necessary business intermediaries. I distributed copies of Patricia's written feedback about our project management approach, including specific praise for my handling of timeline coordination, budget management, and vendor relationships. "As you can see," I said, addressing both Patricia and Ryan, "our most successful client relationships have involved direct collaboration that eliminates unnecessary communication barriers." Patricia nodded enthusiastically as she reviewed her own written feedback. "Absolutely. The efficiency of working with someone who can make both creative and logistical decisions in real time is invaluable for complex projects." Ryan's attempt to insert himself into the conversation was awkward and revealing. "Of course, Emma's creative talents are exceptional," he said, his tone carrying undertones of condescension. "But major business relationships require strategic oversight and consistent management protocols." Patricia's expression shifted to mild confusion. "Strategic oversight of what, exactly?" Emma handled every aspect of our project beautifully. Creative development, practical implementation, timeline management, budget coordination, everything we needed. The disconnect between Ryan's claims about necessary business management and Patricia's direct experience of my comprehensive capabilities was becoming obvious to everyone in the room. Patricia clearly viewed me as a complete professional service provider, not someone who needed business oversight to function effectively. "That's exactly why we're streamlining our operations," I said smoothly. "Eliminating unnecessary layers of management that can slow down communication and decision-making." Patricia's executives began discussing the specific projects they wanted to propose, including the Bend office renovation, the acquisition renovation we'd discussed previously, and a potential third project involving their expansion into the Seattle market. All three projects represented substantial business opportunities that would significantly increase our revenue and establish Richardson Design Studio as a regional leader in commercial design. "The timeline for these projects is aggressive," Patricia explained. But the budgets are substantial and we're willing to pay premium rates for exceptional service delivery. As the discussion progressed, it became clear that Thompson Industries was prepared to commit to a multi-year business relationship worth more than our company had ever generated from a single client source. Their confidence in this expansion was based entirely on their experience working with me during the headquarters renovation. "Emma," Patricia said, addressing me directly, "we're prepared to offer you an exclusive arrangement for all Thompson Industries design needs throughout the Pacific Northwest. The financial terms would be extremely favorable, and the professional opportunities would be significant for building your reputation in larger markets." The offer was beyond anything I'd imagined possible when I'd started investigating Ryan's deceptive practices. Thompson Industries wasn't just satisfied with our previous collaboration. They were prepared to build a substantial portion of their regional expansion around continued partnership with my design services. Ryan's reaction was immediate and desperate. "That's an incredibly generous offer," he said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining professional composure. "Of course, any major business commitments would need to be reviewed through our standard evaluation process." Patricia's confusion deepened. "What evaluation process? We're offering to significantly expand our business relationship based on proven successful collaboration. What additional evaluation is necessary?" The question hung in the air while Ryan struggled to justify his instinct to control business decisions that he had no legitimate authority to manage. His attempts to insert unnecessary approval processes into straightforward business opportunities exposed the arbitrary nature of his interference with my professional relationships. "Patricia," I said, seizing the moment to establish clear business boundaries, "I'm prepared to accept Thompson Industries' offer and begin immediate planning for your upcoming projects. Our operational improvements will ensure even more efficient service delivery than you experienced during the headquarters renovation." Patricia's relief was obvious. "Excellent. I'll have our legal team prepare partnership agreements for your review. When can we schedule initial planning sessions for the Bend and acquisition projects?" As we concluded the meeting with specific timeline commitments and partnership arrangements, Ryan's expression had shifted from desperation to something approaching panic. The business relationship he'd claimed required his strategic management was expanding dramatically based on my direct professional capabilities, and his interference was being revealed as unnecessary and counterproductive. Outside Thompson Industries building, Ryan's carefully maintained professional facade finally cracked completely. "You realize what you've done?" he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You've destroyed our business partnership and humiliated me in front of our biggest client." "I've secured the largest business opportunity in our company's history," I replied calmly. "Thompson Industries is prepared to commit to an exclusive partnership worth more than we've ever generated from any client source. That partnership is based on our company's reputation," Ryan insisted. "Our business systems, our operational structure, our strategic positioning in the market." His attempt to claim credit for business opportunities that existed entirely because of my professional relationships and design expertise was so absurd that I almost laughed. Thompson Industries had specifically requested to work with me personally, praised my comprehensive project management capabilities, and offered exclusive partnership arrangements based on their experience of my service delivery. "Ryan," I said, my voice steady with cold certainty, "Thompson Industries has never had a meaningful business relationship with you. They hired Richardson Design Studio because of my work. They were satisfied with our collaboration because of my professional capabilities, and they're expanding our partnership because they trust my expertise." "Your expertise?" Ryan's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Emma, you wouldn't have any business opportunities without the company structure I built around your artistic talents." The conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing with a call from Marcus Chen. His voice was urgent as he explained that Brad Miller had arrived at our office requesting an immediate meeting with Ryan to discuss crisis management strategies for partnership disputes. The timing was perfect. Ryan's consultant was arriving to help manage the situation I'd created, providing an ideal opportunity to confront the systematic planning that had been aimed at marginalizing my role in our company. "Tell Brad we'll both be there in 20 minutes, I told Marcus, "and ask him to bring all the consulting materials he's prepared for Richardson Design Studio over the past 8 months. Ryan's face went white as he realized I knew about the extensive consulting engagement he'd concealed from me. His attempts to plan my systematic exclusion from business operations were about to be exposed in front of the consultant who'd been advising him on managing creative professionals who don't understand business structure. The drive back to our office was silent, except for the rain drumming against the windshield, and the occasional ping of my phone receiving messages from staff members and clients who'd heard about the morning's dramatic revelations. Word was spreading quickly through Portland's design community that significant changes were happening at Richardson Design Studio. Brad Miller was waiting in our conference room when we arrived, surrounded by folders and documents that apparently contained months of strategic planning for restructuring our business operations. His expression suggested he'd been briefed on the morning's events and was prepared to help Ryan regain control of what he probably viewed as an artist's rebellion against proper business management. "Emma," Brad said, standing to greet me with professional politeness, "Ryan's told me you have some concerns about operational efficiency and communication protocols." His framing of systematic business fraud as concerns about operational efficiency was revealing about both his understanding of the situation and his approach to managing what he considered a problematic creative partner. "I have concerns about being systematically excluded from business operations in my own company," I replied, taking a seat at the conference table. "I understand you've been advising Ryan on strategies for managing that exclusion." Brad's momentary confusion gave way to careful calculation as he realized I was aware of consulting services that Ryan had apparently described differently. "I've been advising Richardson Design Studio on organizational optimization and role clarification," he said diplomatically. "Role clarification for whom?" I asked directly. "Because according to our partnership agreement, Ryan and I are equal co-owners with equal decision-making authority." The question forced Brad to confront the fundamental flaw in his consulting approach. He'd been advising Ryan on managing a business partner as if she were a difficult employee. His recommendations for operational streamlining and creative resource allocation were based on the assumption that Ryan had legitimate authority to restructure my role without my consent. "Sometimes business partnerships benefit from clearer operational boundaries," Brad replied carefully. "Specialization can improve efficiency and reduce conflicts over decision-making authority." "Specialization decided by whom?" I pressed. "And implemented without the consent of the business partner being specialized?" Brad's discomfort was obvious as he realized his consulting engagement had been based on incomplete or misleading information about our business structure and partnership agreement. Ryan had apparently presented our situation as a management challenge rather than a partnership dispute, seeking advice on controlling a creative partner rather than collaborating with an equal business owner. I opened my briefcase and distributed copies of our original partnership agreement, financial records showing the consulting fees Ryan had been paying, and documentation of the operational changes Brad had recommended for managing my involvement in business decisions. "These documents show that you've been paid substantial fees for advice on excluding me from business operations without my knowledge or consent," I said, addressing Brad directly. "Your recommendations have been implemented to systematically undermine my authority as a co-owner while maintaining my creative output." The evidence was undeniable, and Brad's expression shifted from professional confidence to something approaching alarm as he realized the legal implications of his consulting engagement. He'd been providing advice on violating partnership agreements and potentially fraudulent business practices. Ryan's final attempt to salvage his position was characteristic in its combination of desperation and condescension. "Emma, you're clearly emotional about our personal situation, but attacking our business relationships and operational structure isn't going to solve anything." "I'm not attacking our business structure," I replied. "I'm exposing systematic fraud and partnership violations that have been implemented with professional consultation. The emotional component involves my anger at discovering that my husband and business partner has been systematically betraying me for months." The distinction was important because it separated legitimate business concerns from personal relationship issues. Ryan's deceptive practices were serious violations of partnership agreements and fiduciary duties, regardless of our marriage, and his attempts to frame my response as emotional overreaction couldn't change the concrete evidence of financial misconduct and deliberate exclusion from business operations. As the confrontation concluded, Brad Miller gathered his materials and made a hasty exit, clearly recognizing that his consulting engagement had involved potentially illegal business practices. His departure left Ryan and me alone in the conference room where he'd been planning my systematic marginalization while I'd been focused on creating the award-winning design work that made those plans possible. "Emma," Ryan said, his voice finally stripped of professional politeness and revealing raw desperation, "what do you want? Money? Increased profit sharing? Recognition in our marketing materials? Whatever it takes to resolve this situation." His offer to negotiate concessions revealed how completely he'd misunderstood both the situation and my response to it. Ryan still believed he could manage me like a demanding employee, rather than recognizing that I was reclaiming my position as an equal business owner. "I want exactly what I've always been entitled to," I replied. "Equal partnership in the company. I helped build transparent financial management and direct professional relationships with clients who hire our services." "You'll destroy everything we've built together," Ryan warned, his tone shifting to something approaching a threat. "Business relationships depend on stability and consistent management. When you start creating chaos and uncertainty, clients lose confidence." His prediction was immediately contradicted by my phone buzzing with messages from Patricia Thompson's team about timeline planning for our expanded partnership, referral contacts from other Thompson Industries executives, and congratulations from staff members who'd witnessed the morning's dramatic changes. "The only thing being destroyed," I said, standing to leave, "is the fiction that you built this company's success through business management skills. Our clients hired Richardson Design Studio because of my work. They're satisfied with our services because of my professional capabilities, and they're expanding their business relationships because they trust my expertise." As I walked out of the conference room, leaving Ryan alone with the wreckage of his carefully constructed narrative about indispensable business leadership, I felt the profound satisfaction of justice delivered with precision and overwhelming force. The storm that had started when he left me stranded in the rain had concluded with him drowning in the flood of evidence that washed away every lie he'd built our partnership on. Richardson Design Studio would continue thriving under the leadership of the person who'd actually created its success, while Ryan Richardson learned what it felt like to be left behind when the weather changed. The woman who'd been abandoned on a dark street corner had become the hurricane that reshaped everything in its path. And Portland's design community would never again underestimate what happened when you left Emma Richardson standing in the rain with time to plan your destruction. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.